In January of 2023, my partner and I did a quick jaunt down to Walt Disney World. We spent 2 days in the parks and about 4 days total down in the Orlando area. Disney parks vacations are never cheap, and boy do those day ticket prices hurt sometimes. Let's take a look at how much we spent for this trip. Hey, I'm Jacqueline and welcome to the Pixie Dust PhD YouTube channel. Thank you so much for being here, I really appreciate it. If you enjoy the content, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell icon to receive notifications whenever I publish a new video, share with friends, and comment down below. Let me know what your budgeting and money philosophy is towards vacation in general, and especially towards a vacation to the Disney parks. There's prior content on the channel going over this trip in more detail in terms of planning, execution, and vlogs. But here as we're wrapping up details for this trip, let's go over how much money we actually spent. As a brief refresh, here was the general trip itinerary. Midday Wednesday, my partner and I flew down to Orlando. We then had pre-dinner drinks at the Dahlia Lounge and dinner at Toledo. On Thursday, we basically spent all day in the Magic Kingdom. We did take a brief break for lunch at Steakhouse 71. On Friday, we spent all day at Epcot, and the big single ticket item was lunch at Space 220. Saturday was a resort day where we hung out at the Waldorf Astoria. We did get lunch at Disney Springs, and then we had a pretty bougie dinner at Bull and Bear. And Sunday, we flew home. Overall, this was a trip for 2 adults. We had a half day Wednesday, 3 full days, Thursday through Saturday, and then technically, I guess, a half day Sunday, but we pretty much just left. Let's break down our spending by day. On Wednesday, our flight down to Orlando miraculously was so cheap, I think it was $50-ish plus tax per person, so in total, only a little over $100. We did Uber from the airport to where we were staying at Bay Lake Tower. Luckily for me, this coincided with an Uber promotion I had where if you spent over $15 in a single trip, you got $5 back. So we saved a tiny bit of money there on the Uber. We did take the free Disney transportation from Magic Kingdom out to Coronado Springs. Then we paid for pre-dinner drinks and a snack at Dahlia Lounge and dinner at Toledo. We did indulge in the chef special for 2 at Toledo as well as a bottle of wine, so this was definitely more on the expensive side. And we did not have the best time with transit from Magic Kingdom to Coronado Springs, so instead of taking the free transit back to Magic Kingdom, we did decide to pay for an Uber. That night we were staying at Bay Lake Tower, and we do own a Disney Vacation Club contract there. This night cost us 15 vacation points. These were our 2022 points, so if you multiply 15 points times the 2022 annual dues at Bay Lake Tower, it ends up being a little over $100 in annual dues worth of points. For what it's worth though, in a vast majority of this video, I'm not going to be counting that monetary amount for using our DVC points. My personal philosophy is that we've already paid for these, that money is already gone. The initial purchase price to buy the contract is long gone, and we pay our annual dues in one lump sum every year. So yes, the money for the DVC contract purchase as well as the money for the annual dues does contribute to us having these points, but in my mind, we're paying for the points whether or not we use them. With that being said, the total for Wednesday, again not counting any monetary value for our Disney Vacation Club points, was about $450. Thursday was our first parks day, we spent it at the Magic Kingdom. For 2 adults, 2-day base tickets, so not park hoppers, cost about $588. That's almost $300 per person, or almost $150 per person per day. That is definitely expensive, and the cost of these short length day tickets is a really hard pill to swallow. I think this partially helps explain why we often don't go on short trips to Disney World. The day ticket prices are just rough. For our Magic Kingdom day, we did also decide to buy 1-day Memory Maker. That was about $75 after taxes, and we did each get Genie Plus. It was only $15 per person this day, so not too bad overall. It was surprisingly a fairly light eating day for us. My partner got a coffee in the morning while we were at Magic Kingdom, but otherwise we saved our appetites for lunch. At Steakhouse 71, we each got an entree and split the giant fishbowl cocktail for 2. Later back at Magic Kingdom, we did get a Dole Whip snack, of course. And then we capped off our night with drinks both at California Grill and Steakhouse 71. And again, this night we were staying at Bay Lake Tower with a cost of 15 vacation points for the night. For this day, we didn't have any promotions, deals, steals, or coupons, so the actual cost is the same as what we ended up paying. This is in contrast to yesterday where we did have the cost of the Uber, but we paid $5 less. Nothing like that today. Overall, factoring in the full cost of park tickets onto this day alone, we ended up spending a little under $900. But without the cost of those park tickets, that's just under $300 for everything else that we did that day. Friday was our Epcot day, so a lot of fun eating and drinking to be had. For just one day, we hit up a lot of the Festival of the Arts food booths. I'm really proud of us. You can see a full review of everything we ate on a prior video in the channel. I will leave a link to that in the description below. Other than the Festival of the Arts booths, our big ticket here was lunch at Space 220. We did dine with another friend, and we all paid together on one check just to make the server's life easier. In total, that was 3 prefix lunches, 1 Coke, and 2 cocktails, and that came out to $215. Our friend did have a discount that we were able to use, but of course we added gratuity on top of it. Subsequently, our friend Venmo'd us $60 for their portion of the bill. That means that we spent $155 on this lunch for us. Wrapping up our day, we did actually check out of Bay Lake Tower this morning, but we needed to go back and fetch our things. Rather than fight the crowds with the monorail, we decided to take an Uber from Epcot back to Bay Lake Tower. Then, once we collected our items at Bay Lake Tower, we again Ubered from Bay Lake Tower over to our next hotel, which was a Hilton Buena Vista Palace in the Disney Springs area. That Uber ended up being $16, so we did get the $5 promo code applied because we spent over $15 for one ride at Uber. At the Hilton Buena Vista Palace, we had a king room with a Disney Springs view. We booked this for about $230. However, before we even left for our trip, that cost was fully refunded to us through our American Express promotion. We have the highest tier of Hilton Honors American Express. It is the Aspire credit card. That does cost $450 a year, but one of the perks is that you get a $250 resort credit. A lot of the Hiltons in the Orlando area count as resorts, and you can use this $250 towards a room rate. Therefore, with that credit card perk, we were able to fully cover the cost of this room. If you want to learn more about that Hilton Honors Aspire American Express credit card, and specifically how we use it for our trips to Walt Disney World, I'll link to a video in the description below. It's working out really well for us overall. I know the $450 annual fee is a lot, but I definitely think it pays for itself. With that being said, the total cost of everything we experienced on Friday was about $575. However, the price we actually paid for everything was under $300, largely again driven by the fact that we didn't have to actually shell out any cash for the hotel night. Saturday, we woke up at the Hilton Buena Vista Palace, checked out, and headed over to Disney Springs. There we got brunch at the Boathouse, and we just sat at the bar. We didn't need reservations or anything. We also got drinks at Jock Lindsay's and some cookies and a cold brew from Gideon's. I also bought some gifts for my nieces and nephews at the Uniqlo in Disney Springs, as well as World of Disney. But the point of Saturday really was to be a resort day at the Waldorf Astoria. So once we wrapped up at Disney Springs, we walked back over to the Hilton Buena Vista Palace, collected our things, and then took an Uber from Buena Vista Palace over to the Waldorf. At the time we booked our Waldorf Astoria room, it was going for 80,000 points or over $800 a night for the non-refundable rate. We, however, used a free reward night. Similar to that $250 credit that we used the night prior at the Hilton Buena Vista Palace, this night for the Waldorf, we're using a free reward night that we get through that Hilton Honors Aspire American Express credit card. A once yearly perk is you get that one free reward night, you can spend it wherever. Therefore, for this night at the Waldorf, we didn't use any of our Hilton points, and we also didn't pay any amount of cash. As part of our resort day, we hung out at the pool and got a couple of high noons. Then we also had drinks at the bar in the Waldorf lobby, followed by a very cool dinner at Bull and Bear. If you've never experienced an actual steakhouse, I highly recommend it if you want to blow a lot of money on one meal. It definitely was an experience I'll never forget. Another perk of that Hilton Honors Aspire American Express credit card is we automatically have diamond status with Hilton. There's a lot of perks that go along with that, including a food and beverage credit. Honestly, the food and beverage credit might come at lower tiers of Hilton status. I'm not too sure. I just know we definitely get it. The food and beverage credit amount will vary depending on the brand of Hilton hotel you're staying in and also where it's located. For example, the amount of a food and beverage credit at a DoubleTree hotel way out in the suburbs is almost surely going to be far less than if you were staying at an expensive hotel like a Waldorf or a name brand Hilton in a proper city like New York. At the Waldorf Astoria Orlando, when we were there, the food and beverage credit was $25 per person per night up to 2 guests. That meant that we had $50 food and beverage credit to spend total. This covered our full bar bill and then just a teeny tiny bit of the dinner. But overall, that was $50 in savings. Looking at the cost of everything we did on Saturday, especially factoring in that over $800 hotel night, is very expensive, almost $1,500 that day. But because we didn't actually pay for the hotel and we had that food and beverage credit to help cover some of our drinks, our total cost was far less. In reality, we spent about $600 that day. That's still a very expensive day, don't get me wrong, but we knew that would be the case having booked dinner at Bull and Bear. It was a splurge day and we had mentally prepared for that. For Sunday, there's not too much to say. We took an Uber from the Waldorf over to MCO Airport. Again, this was more than $15 in a single ride, so we did get that $5 promotional credit. Flights back home were considerably more expensive than flights down there at about $240 total, again for 2 adults. And from DCA Airport, we can take public transit back to where we live. But the weather was pretty crummy and we were feeling lazy, so we just took an Uber instead. On Sunday, the driving cost definitely was flights, and we ended up spending a little under $300. In total, adding everything up, the cost of what we experienced was over $3,600. But with the Uber promotion we made use of several times, as well as perks from the Hilton Honors Aspire American Express credit card, we did not spend actually nearly that much. The total amount we paid came out to just under $2,500. That's definitely still an expensive trip for 2 adults for about 4 days, but it could have been a lot worse. We can also break down costs by category. The main cost for a lot of trips is going to be your hotels. In our case, this is a little tricky to calculate. It kind of depends on how you view things. We stayed at the Hilton Buena Vista Palace. Again, that should have been about $230, but we didn't actually pay any of that. Similarly, the Waldorf Astoria should have been a little over $800, but we didn't pay that either. And then for Bay Lake Tower, we spent 30 vacation points total, which you can debate how you want to decide what that monetarily is worth. Again, as I previously mentioned, I don't mentally assign the cost of the initial purchase price or annual dues to these points. To me, we've paid for the points and we may as well just use them. But if you did fully ignore the initial purchase price and assign a monetary value to those DVC points just based on annual dues, those 2 nights would have cost about $212 in annual dues. And those Hilton nights we didn't actually pay for, but we do pay the $450 annual fee for the credit card, so you could technically factor that in if you wanted. Therefore, in terms of what we paid for these hotel nights, that can range anywhere from $0 to over $650, just depending on how you want to look at it. For the remainder of this video though, I'm going to count this as $0 because in my mind that is what I paid on my credit card for this exact trip. Transit's another big category. For us, this was flights and ride shares. Our flight down to Orlando felt like an absolute steal at only a little over $100 for both of us. Our flight on the way back was more normal at about $240 for both of us. And we took a variety of ride shares. Some we pretty much had to, others were out of laziness. But at least the timing worked out to where we had an Uber promotion to save $5 here and there. Food and drink is always a pretty big driver of our trip costs, whether that's to Disney or anywhere else. And I can't really separate out alcohol here because, for example, when we were dining at table service restaurants, we typically had drinks and those all come on the same bill. I apologize that this font is small. I was trying to fit everything on one screen, and I'm not going to go through this line by line, but feel free to pause or take a screenshot here if you want. And if you have any questions about our particular food and drink experiences, leave those in the comments down below and I'll do my best to get back to you. Overall, we spent about $1,250 on food and drink. The biggest cost here certainly being Bull and Bear and Toledo. At both of those, we did get a bottle of wine, so if you aren't a drinker, you could bring this cost down substantially. But for us, it enhances the experience, and we were on vacation, we figured these were splurge meals anyway, so we just went for it. Then we had our other theme park expenses as well as gifts. You really can't get around needing theme park tickets if you want to go into the theme parks. The cost for those is what it is, especially if you're only going for a short length of time. We certainly didn't need to buy one-day Memory Maker, but I'm happy that we did, and I feel I got my money's worth out of it, so no regrets there. Similarly, Genie Plus really made our day a lot better, more smooth. We were able to do just about everything we wanted. And it was only $15 per person that day, so relatively cheap, all things considered. We don't tend to buy souvenirs for ourselves, so this isn't something I'm used to budgeting for, but now that I have nieces and nephews, it's something I think about more. If you have no desire for material objects from trips, you could mentally not have a budget for gifts like I used to, but now that is an expense that I endure. Separating a few of these categories out a little more and looking at them, it is obvious what the main costs were. Food and drink was massive for us, and those theme park tickets cost quite a bit. Flights ended up being okay, doesn't feel like a total steal, but it also wasn't terrible. Depending on where you live, you may need to mentally factor in far more or far less for flights. Now, if we take these categories and look at them as a share of the whole of the approximately $2,500 we spent, again, you can see what jumps out right away. The theme park add-ons, gifts, and ride shares ended up being a pretty small amount of our overall trip spend. Theme park tickets and our food and beverage costs account for almost 3/4 of the total trip cost. And with those facts covered about our trip costs, here's some musings. We did buy our theme park tickets in October. Again, this trip was for January, so it is nice to be able to spread out that cost. However, unlike typical Memory Maker, you can't actually pre-purchase Memory Maker one day in advance. You have to do that on the day of. So we weren't able to pre-purchase that cost, though it was only about $75, so definitely not as big of an expense to get out of the way as those theme park tickets. We really didn't set a budget for this trip, and I think that's pretty obvious from our spending, especially our food and beverage spending. If we had set an actual budget, I'm sure we would have done a better job sticking to it, but that's just not the philosophy we have going into vacation these days. We're certainly privileged to be able to set a lot of those worries aside. To help with this, we specifically have a totally separate bank account from any of our other accounts that is just for trip expenses. We both contribute to it regularly, we check on it all the time so we know how much is in there, and knowing how large it was at the time we took this trip, we knew we couldn't really overspend, so buying a drink here or there extra wasn't a concern. At one point, we had debated getting a rental car instead of taking ride shares. Looking at the breakdown of the cost, though, it's pretty obvious that the ride shares actually weren't all that expensive, and we definitely would have spent more on the rental car, plus the parking fees at the Hilton Buena Vista Palace, as well as at the Waldorf Astoria. Relying on ride shares is not my favorite. It definitely just isn't nearly as fast and efficient as if you have your own car or your own rental car to use. But for a short trip, I think for us, the trade-off makes sense to be able to save some money by doing the ride shares and just have to wait around for them for a little bit longer than we would if we had our own car. Thinking about the category spend, but setting food and beverage aside, the other big things are flights and park tickets. Unfortunately, there's no super good way to decrease these prices. With flights, you can get luckier. That being said, I was monitoring these for months on end, and this really was the cheapest it could have been for us. If our days were more flexible, maybe we could have gotten flights for a cheaper price, but it wouldn't have been substantial, I doubt. Without any real obvious way to save, we simply just have to factor in the cost of flights and theme park tickets when we're doing a theme park trip. If we needed to make up some money, obviously our food and beverage spend could be far less. But we intentionally did book some fancier and more expensive meals, so we were well braced for this. Frankly, if you don't drink alcohol, or if you drink way less alcohol than we do when we're on vacation, you could save a lot of money just from not having a bottle of red wine with dinner. And my last reflection is that leaving this trip, I really felt like I spent $0 on hotels. When we checked out of Bay Lake Tower, our folio came with $0 on it. Same for Hilton Buena Vista Palace. At the Waldorf, we did charge our pre-dinner drinks as well as our dinner to the room. That's how you make use of the food and beverage credit. So upon checking out, our folio did have those costs on it, but the room rate was fully covered. Now, of course, you can debate how much we actually paid for these accommodations, given that we paid to become DVC members and we pay a hefty yearly annual fee for that Hilton Honors Aspire American Express credit card. But to me, it really does feel like for this trip, when we're leaving, we've paid $0 for those hotels. When I get home and look at my credit card bill, there are not room rates reflected on there. So I really enjoy that, and psychologically, I think it's definitely a perk of being a DVC owner. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below about how you approach budgeting for a Disney trip. We definitely tend to have more of a splurge mindset when you go on vacation, so I'm definitely a terrible example of having a strict budget in mind when you're traveling to Disney. Thank you again so much for watching, and big thanks to all the likers, subscribers, and commenters. May the rest of your day be magical, and we'll see you real soon at Pixie Dust PhD.